بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله العظيم اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الجهل وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علمك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Our topic today is al-Mutlaq and al-Muqayyad. You remember we said to understand the apparent of Zahir, we need to discuss Awamir, Nawahi, Mafahim, Am and Khas, and finally Mutlaq and Muqayyad. We have reached now the final, Mutlaq and Muqayyad. And we have actually also entered the second half of the book. The first half is finished. So, Mutlaq, which can be translated as absolute, and Muqayyad as modified, with limited, restricted. Mutlaq is similar to Am, to the general. It shows some kind of generality, some kind of inclusiveness. But the difference is that Am is always understood from some linguistic means. Can be kul, can be jami, ayyo, nakare fi siyaq al-nafi, nakare fi siyaq al-nahy, jam' mu'alla bi-alif wal-lam. All these cases that we mentioned, we said for Am, we understand the umum or generality from lafz, okay, from text. Either there is one term like kul or jami, or there is the whole structure of the sentence is made in the way that shows inclusiveness. Mutlaq is the one that we understand its generality from non-linguistic source.
Okay.
What we call it from muqaddamatul hikmah or muqaddamatul hikmah, the prerequisites of wisdom. What does it mean? It means that sometimes a concept has been mentioned which is general, and no modifier has been mentioned. No exception has been made. It's not specifically saying that it is meant to be general, but we say, as a concept, this is general. There is no sign of being limited, so the speaker must have meant it to be general. There is no specific sign of being meant to be general, but we say, if it was not meant to be general, why there was no mention of any modifier? Why there was no mention of any qaid, any limit? Okay? So, for example, sometimes we are told, أعتق أية رقبة, free or release any slave. Ayya. This ayya shows generality. So is this Am or Mutlaq? It's Am. أعتق أية رقبة. This is Am. Sometimes Mula says, أعتق رقبة free slave. It doesn't say any slave. Free slave. So there is no mention of umum. But we say Mawla is wise. He has used a term which is general. Slave can be mu'min, can be non-mu'min. Mawla knows all this. If Mawla had wanted from us to free only mu'min, raqabah, he should have mentioned this, because he knows that raqabah is applicable to mu'min and non-mu'min. A wise person who knows the language and knows that this term is general, if he doesn't mean to be general, he has to mention. Now that he has not mentioned, so we assume that he means any raqabah. So you see the result is the same. But in the case of it's very easy, because there is mention of umumiyya, ayya raqabah. Here there is no mention of umumiyya, but with few points that we put together, we come to the conclusion that it means generality. Is it clear? Very clear, yeah? Very clear, yeah? Okay. Al-mutlaq هو اللفظ الدال على شموله لأفراد متعلقه بعد توفر مقدمات الحكمة. Mutlaq is the term that indicates generality, inclusiveness with respect to the instances of what it has belonged to, not through lafz, not through a, for example, kol or jami or بعد توفر مقدمات الحكمة, after all the prerequisites of wisdom are together. When they come together, we understand. So umum is there, but umum is because of muqaddamatul hikmah. But in the case of if you remember, in the case of we said al-lafdhu dalu bil-wadh'. There is dalalat wad'iyyah, so there is a text that shows this. But here there is no text. For example, in the Quran, in Surah Baqarah, verse 275, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وأحل الله البيع. ayah, أحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. Allah has permitted purchase, business in the sense of selling and buying. Yeah, purchase or selling and buying. وحرم الربا, of course, usually is prohibited. This أحل الله البيع, although is not mentioned along with kol or jami, but it is general. Any kind of bay is included. So if there are cases that are excluded, we take them out. Otherwise, this sentence by itself is mutlaq. Ahallallahu al-bay. Doesn't say a special type, any type of bay.
It's mutlaq and
Mutlaq?
It's mutlaq and right?
No, why
Because it's, the sentence is it's not khas. It doesn't specify.
It's mutlaq. Because mutlaq is also general, but the difference between mutlaq and is that has to be through
one of the
a linguistic indicator, in linguistic sign. Muqayyad is when a modifier has been mentioned. For example, Surah An-Nisa, verse 92. وَمَنْ قَتَلَ مُؤْمِنًا خَطَأً فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ. If God forbids someone mistakenly kills a mu'min, he didn't want to kill, but there was an accident, so the mu'min is killed. So here, he should free a raqaba, a slave. But there is a modifier, فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ. So this is muqayyad. If mu'mina was not there, just was tahriru raqabah, was mutlaq. But now it says tahriru raqabatin mu'mina. It's muqayyad.
So is mu'mina is female here? Mu'minatin?
Because raqabah is female as a term. Even if it is man, we call it raqabah. Yeah? Raqabah means neck.
Yeah.
What are the muqaddamatul hikmah or prerequisites of wisdom? The conditions that should be met so that we can assume the speaker has meant generality.
Believer in this example.
Pardon?
This example, the term believer in this verse. Free a believing slave.
Yes.
The believing is the conditional wisdom.
No, that is muqayyad.
Yes.
We are talking about muqaddamatul hikmah for mutlaq.
Oh, okay.
If there is muqayyad, then there is no ambiguity. The point is, when there is a term like raqaba, which is general in itself, I mean by general that it includes any raqaba. Okay? If our master, our Mawla, has not brought any condition to it, he knows raqaba is inclusive. He has not mentioned any modifier, and he was able to mention modifiers, and he was in the position of mentioning all the details because he expects from us to do what he wants. He's in maqam al-amal, يعني في مقام البيان للعمل, he is explaining what we should do. So if you put all this together, I repeat, you have a speaker who expects from you to do something. He only mentioned a term which has different types. It's general, raqaba. He knows that this raqaba can be mu'min, non-mu'min. He has not mentioned any modifier. And he wants you to start acting after this. It's not that he says, now I give you the principles, later I will explain the details. No, he is now expecting from you that as soon as he finishes, you start practicing. And he has no also obstacle, no problem. Sometimes, for example, maybe Mawla is not able to speak. There is taqiyya, maybe, for example, he cannot tell all the details. He is in hurry, for example. He cannot, wait. He says something and says, later I speak the details. But there is no such a thing. He knows that this term is general. He has not mentioned any modifier. He expects us to start practicing right after he says this. He has no other, problems. So, any aqil, says that, then it means that the master has meant it to be general. Otherwise, he should have mentioned, it was very simple for him to add mu'mina. Why he didn't add? He doesn't want us, to be confused. He's hakim, he's wise.
No, but in this
If I want from you something, okay, and I don't mention it, so it means that I'm not wise. Yes? For example, if I want from you to bring me, for example, water which is cold, but I only say bring me water, And I was able to say cold water, but I just said bring water. So if you bring me hot water, I cannot blame you. Yes? Because I didn't mention cold water. You said water, this is water. There's a confusion? Yes.
Sheikh, when you said that free the slaves,
Yes.
in that case, when you say free the slaves, it is assumed that you're talking about all the slaves.
Free a slave.
The slaves.
One slave.
No, it says free the slaves.
No. If you say free the slaves, that's another issue.
So even if I don't use the
No.
modifier like
He
all,
says free one slave. Raqabatan. One slave. But one slave can be mu'min, can be kafir. Can be man, can be woman, can be young, can be old. He doesn't mention any details, so it means that it's enough. So like for example, the story of Bani Israel. Inna Allah ya'murukum an tadhbahu baqaratan. Allah said you should slaughter a cow. They had not studied usul. Okay, or they wanted to do mischief. Otherwise, Allah says, "Fazbahu baqara." They could have started the first baqara that was available. But they said, "Inna al-baqara tashabaha alayna." We don't know what is this baqara. The color, the size, everything. But if they had studied usul, maybe they studied, but they didn't do mubahasa. So they didn't learn these things, or they had bad intention. Maybe because Allah says, فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. They wanted to, bring excuses in order not to do it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it more difficult. The more they ask, Allah made it more difficult. If they had not asked,
Just simple one.
the simple was enough. Okay? So, تَذْبَحُ بَقَرَةً. Any baqarah. Because if Allah had wanted a special type, He should have mentioned. أَعْتِرْ رَقَبَةً. He didn't say أَيَّةَ رَقَبَةً. If He had said أَيَّةَ رَقَبَةً, that was umum. He said raqaba, but still there is generality which is understood by muqaddamatul hikmah. So, muqaddamatul hikmah, the conditions or the prerequisites for wisdom here is that there must be possibility of having mutlaq and muqayyad, and Mawla is able to speak all the details. He is in maqamul bayan. It means that he wants also to mention all the details because he expects us to do right away, what he says, and still he hasn't mentioned the qaid modifier. So it means that he didn't mean. So if you have mutlaq and you do all these checkings and you don't find any modifier, you act according to mutlaq. But if there is muqayyad, you have to act according to muqayyad. For example, if in one hadith it is said أَعْتِقْ رَغَبَةً, in another hadith it is said أَعْتِقْ رَغَبَةً مُؤْمِنَةً, then of course you have to give preference to muqayyad. So, by this we finished 5 different types of zawahir, apparent meanings. Awamir, nawahi, mafahim, am and khas, mutlaq and muqayyad. Now the next discussion is about al-usul al-lahdiyya. There are some linguistic principles that help us understand what is meant. Sometimes we may have an initial doubt, that is before applying these principles. After applying these principles, doubt can be handled. But there is an initial doubt. We don't know what is meant. We need some principles to help us. We call them al-usul al-lafdiyya, linguistic principles. For example, someone says, I saw a lion. رأيت أسدا. You may doubt whether he means a real lion or he means a brave person.
Yes.
رجلا شجاعا. The real meaning, المعنى الحقيقي, the true or the literal meaning for lion is that animal. Okay? But the metaphorical meaning is a brave person. So now, if you are in a situation and you don't know whether the real meaning is meant or the metaphorical meaning is meant, and suppose the metaphorical meaning has no evidence to make it overweigh. Ulama tell us that one of the linguistic principles is, and actually this is not ulama saying as ulama, because this is the way language works. They inform us about the rules of language. We can assume that al-ma'na al-haqiqi is meant. Because any speaker, if he doesn't use the term in the real sense, he has to bring evidence. So, asalatul haqiqah is a linguistic principle which says we should assume that haqiqah is meant unless there is evidence to suggest otherwise. Okay? So it's a kind of fundamentality or primordiality of haqiqah. Haqiqah means to use the term in its literal sense, in its, lexical term meaning, not metaphorical. Sometimes, maybe there is evidence that he means metaphorical. Okay? For example, he says, there was a debate and I saw a lion on member speaking and refuting bad ideas, for example. When you say I saw a lion on member,
Yeah, that's metaphorical.
then you understand that this is metaphorical. There is no doubt. But if there is no evidence, there is nothing that makes zahir to be majazi, to be metaphorical, you assume haqiqah. So, when you have to choose between the real meaning or metaphorical meaning, you prefer the real meaning. Because the real meaning is zahir. Question?
Yeah, how's this different from taking the outward meaning, so the zahir of the...
Inshallah, we'll explain. Actually, some ulama have said these are not except different types of zuhur. Because some people handled this as if these are themselves independent and important. But some ulama say no, it all goes back to hujjatul zuhur and asalatul zuhur. Normally, haqiqa is zahir. Yes, this is what has been said. The second linguistic principle is asalatul umum. If you don't know whether am is meant or khas, you assume am is meant. Because am is the apparent meaning, the outward meaning, al-ma'na al-zahiri. He has said, akram kull al-alimin, akram al-ulama. So this is am. And then still you have doubt whether he means all or he doesn't mean all. You should assume he means all. Okay? So between am and khas, which one is more important? Which one is stronger? Am. Because am has a sign. Also, asalatul itlaq. Whenever you have doubt whether it's meant to be mutlaq or muqayyad, you assume that mutlaq is meant. Again, why? Because this is zahir. He has mentioned something and he knows that this can be applied to both, for example, mu'min and non-mu'min, and he didn't mention any qaid. So why you have doubt? This initial doubt should be ignored. You have doubt between am and khas, and there is no mention of any qaid, condition. So assume that am is meant. Between mutlaq and muqayyad the same. Between haqiqa and majaz the same. So some ulama have rightly said that all these asalatul haqiqa, asalatul umum, asalatul itlaq, they are all different branches of asalatul zuhur. As long as ma'na zahiri is there and there is no evidence against it, we go by it. We go by ma'na zahiri. Okay? Is it clear?
Yes.
So, Sheikh Muzaffar says, al-usul al-lafdiyah, linguistic principles, هي قواعد وضعت من قبل العلماء. These are the rules that ulama have set up لإثبات مقصود المتكلم عند الشك به, to prove what the speaker means when we have doubt about what he means. So he explains that when something is mentioned and there are two or more possibilities, we need to prefer one of them. So we look. If one of them is am, the other are khas, we prefer am. If one is haqiqa, the other is majaz, we prefer haqiqa. If one is mutlaq, other muqayyad, we prefer mutlaq. Al-qa'idatul amma, the general rule is this. Whenever there is doubt whether a speaker has meant what is zahir or he meant what is not zahir, what is the apparent meaning or what is not, we assume he meant the apparent. Okay? If you have doubt. And therefore he says, some ulama have said, إن جميع الأصول اللفظية ترجع في واقعها إلى أصالة الظهور. All these linguistic principles in reality are reduced to أصالة الظهور. So one is أصالة الحقيقة. You know حقيقة and majaz? Yeah?
Yes.
حقيقة, for example, the real meaning of lion is an animal, which is a special animal, you know. But majazi is brave person, rajul shuja. If you say ra'aytu asadan yarmi, this is a classic example. I saw a lion which was shooting or sending arrow, throwing arrow. Here we know that he means majazi.
Yes.
Yeah, because there is here evidence. Or a lion on member, there is evidence. But if there is no evidence, we assume lion means
Animal.
that animal.
So we have to take it as the animal according to the qa'idatul am. Okay, so the qa'idatul am says you have to take the zahiri.
Amma, general, not am khas.
No, am.
Yes, yes. So we go by the ma'na zahiri, by tuhur. So asalatul haqiqah, asalatul umum, asalatul itlaq. I don't think it's difficult, and you have alhamdulillah. Okay, now we move on to a very important discussion. Of course, this was important, but this is more important. Maybe you have heard this, that sometimes we have riwayat which conflict with each other. Okay? If you have one riwayah, for example, then you try to apply asalatul haqiqa, asalatul umum, asalatul itlaq, all these things that we discuss, am, khas, amr, nahi, all these things, to understand the meaning. If we have two riwayah that conflict each other, one says you must do it, another says you must not do it. One says it is wajib, another says it's not wajib. Okay? In the case that there is no way to put them together, you remember I talked about jama' or fi. Sometimes there is jama' or fi. For example, am and khas, this is not conflict. One says respect all ulama, another one says don't respect mushrikeen of ulama. Those who are polytheists, for example. This is not conflict. We don't mean by conflict am and khas, mutlaq and muqayyad. This is not conflict, because this is the way every aqil understands that the meaning is a combination of two. When you have akram al-ulama and la tukram al-mushrikeen min al-ulama, this don't conflict. Okay?
Yeah, we're talking about tanaqub in this discussion.
Yes.
We're talking about tanaqub.
Yes. So there must be either tanaquz completely, or, for example, overlap. If it's khusum and batch, also this is a problem. Khusum and batch, the two circles that part of them is common, but they have also two exclusive parts. This is khusum and batch, they overlap. Okay? This is again problem. What should I do with respect to the overlap? If it is am and khas or mutlaq and muqayyad, means there is a small circle and a bigger circle, this is not conflict. Because in the smaller space we act according to khas or muqayyad, for the rest we act according to am or mutlaq. But if there is overlap, or if there is tabayun, totally different, what should we do?
Is that two circles side by side?
Yes.
Either side by side or overlap?
And an overlap.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
What should we do?
Use our judgment.
So, how do you use your aql here?
You refer the Quran.
What is the marja use the judgment?
Yeah, of course, this question is not for us, this question is for faqih.
Okay,
Yeah, we cannot
yes, we can't do that.
ourselves decide
Yeah.
to choose this hadith or that hadith. All these things is to understand the way fuqaha argue and make decision. So, if you have two conflicting hadiths, what should you do?
What is the Quran?
First of all, remember, this discussion at-ta'arud bayn al-khabarain, at-ta'arud bayn al-khabarain, when there is conflict or opposition between two riwayah, two hadith, this is when both of them have been verified as reliable hadith. So you have done tahqiq al-sanad, tahqiq al-matn, everything. And then when it comes to dalala, they conflict. Otherwise, if one hadith is sahih, another one is da'if, there is no ta'aruz. We ignore da'if, the one which is weak.
So both have to be the same level.
Not same level, but reliable.
Like,
So, there are two hadiths. Please listen to this sentence very carefully. There are two hadiths that both of them are reliable in this sense, that if we had them, each of them by itself, we were acting according to it. So each of them by itself is enough. I am not saying they are equal. Okay, maybe one is sahih, one is, for example, hasana. Okay, one is mutawatir, one is khabar wahid of adil. They are not equal, but what is important is each of them has passed the test of tahqiq al-sanad wa tahqiq al-mat. It means that each of them by itself was a good source. We could have followed the instruction which is in that hadith if it was only that hadith. The only problem we have with this hadith is that it conflicts another reliable hadith. So if they don't reach this level, we don't have ta'aruz. Is it clear? It's a very important point. If two marja have different opinions, you can say there is conflict. But if there is one marja and 100, ignorant people, this is not ta'aruz.
I think it's clear.
Now it's clear. They have to be reliable, both. If they are both reliable, then we say, okay, now there is conflict. So, here, what ulama do is, they approach it in two ways. One is they say, let us see what is the requirement of reason. What reason tells us to do. The second is to see if in the teachings of Ahlul Bayt themselves there is a special treatment. There's a special ilaj. Ilaj? Treatment. So, if we had no hadith about how to tackle the issue of ta'arud, we would have just followed our intellect. But if we have a specific guidelines, then we should follow those guidelines. So we discuss it in two levels. Before I talk about what aql requires and what hadith requires, let us explain again, according to the text, the discussion. So, at-ta'arud bayn al-khabarain, conflict between two hadith, two narrations. And here we want to see what are the rules that we can follow in order to solve this problem. التعارض بين الخبرين هو التكاذب بين الخبرين. يعني it must be as if one of them says the other one is right. The other says this one is right. There is no way to put them together. There is no way that both of them can be correct.
One is a lie. It's saying that the other one is a lie.
Yes. If it was am and khas, both of them can be correct. If it was mutlaq and muqayyad, both can be correct. But ta'aruz is when there is no way to have them together. You must assume that either this was said or the other one was said. Or this was said, really that was said, for example, as taqiyya. Because both cannot be meant by Imams alayhi salam or by Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. At-takadhub bayn al-khabarain. They reject each other, they refute each other. So, this is very important. He says, يُقْصَدُ بِالتَّكَاذُبِ بَيْنَ الْخَبَرَيْنِ. We mean by them rejecting each other, أَنَّ كُلًّا مِنَ الْخَبَرَيْنِ إِذَا تَوَفَّرَ عَلَى جَمِيعِ الشُّرُوطِ وَمُقَوِّمَاتِ الْحُجِّيَّةِ يُبْطِلُ الْخَبَرَ الْآخَرَ وَيُكَذِّبُ. When this one has all the conditions and requirements for being valid, this rejects the other one. And the other one, when it has all the conditions, rejects the other one. If one of them doesn't have all the conditions, there is no problem.
No problem.
This is something that we can ignore it. So, he mentions few conditions for ta'arud. So, in order to have a real case of ta'arud, real case of conflict, there must be few things. One, each of these two sides by itself should be hujjah. It has to have all the conditions of being valid. Okay? This is one. Two, they cannot both be maqtu' as-sudur. Remember maqtu' as-sudur?
Yeah.
Something that you are sure it is said by Prophet or Imam. They cannot be both issued by Imam. But you can add a comment here that unless there is taqiyya. If there is taqiyya, it's possible that both of them are from Ma'sum. You understand? But if it was not the case of taqiyya, both cannot be said. Maybe it was better to say both cannot be meant, but both can be said. The other thing is that they should not be so different in the case that one of them is certainly said, the other one is possibly. Because if one of them is so strong, then we go for the one which is more stronger. Or if there is a technical discussion here which is maybe not needed, but I say it quickly. There is a discussion whether you need to be having suspicion. Remember suspicion in the technical sense, dhann, more than 50%. This is not suspicion in the moral sense, yeah? We said anything more than 50 and before 100 is dhann. Or we say in Farsi, goman, suspicion. Some people say a riwayah, a hadith can be hujjah if after all the checkings, sanad, everything, it can produce suspicion. If after all these things still for you is 50-50 or even less than 50%, you should not act according to that riwayah. Some people have made this condition, but some people say this condition is not important because it's not something based on the individual cases. It has to be no'i. In general, when you hear something from a reliable person, either you believe in it or you assume that this is more likely to be the case. If in a particular case you don't have suspicion, it's not important. Okay, anyway, Sheikh Fazli says, if you are one of those people who believe that having suspicion or having dhann, actual dhann, about what hadith says is a condition, then in ta'aruz, both of them drop. Because you cannot have dhann for both sides. Okay, can you have dhann for both sides? You say A is more probable and B is more probable? It doesn't make sense. So it means both drop. So again, we don't have any case to discuss. To make it simple, I repeat, and maybe this much is enough. We have two hadith or two sets of hadith. Sometimes we have few hadiths in one side and few hadiths another side, or maybe one hadith here, few hadith. Anyway, we have two hadiths or two sets of hadiths. All have passed the test about sanad and matn. Tahqiq al-sanad, tahqiq al-matn, everything perfect. In dalalah, in their meaning, they conflict. And the conflict is serious. There is no way to put them together. There is no way to come up with a meaning which accepts both. There is no jama' or fi. Okay? There is no thing that common sense can say, okay, I understand these two together. This says, if I am right, the other one is right. The other one says, if I am right, the other one is wrong. So this is ta'arud. If we have hadith like this, what should we do? Okay?
Could you give maybe an example so we can understand it better of two conflicting real life case hadiths that we have?
Is this like
For example, if one hadith says Salatul Jum'ah is wajib, another hadith says Salatul Jum'ah is haram in the time of ghaibah. One says wajib, one is haram. What should we do? Okay. Now that you understood what is the topic at issue, we said we discussed this in two levels. One is in the level of having no specific guidelines, and just we want to see what aql says to do. Suppose even you are not Muslims, any rational person, when he has two conflicting signs, evidence, what would he do? What aql requires here? This is one level of discussion. Second is to see what special guidelines we can receive from hadith, from sunnah to solve this problem. Because this is not something new. Even in the time of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, this issue was already there. And people had raised this issue to Ahlul Bayt that we receive conflicting hadith. What should we do? So, we discuss it in two levels. ما يقتضيه حكم العقل, what the judgment of aql requires, and we call this al-qa'idatul awwaliyah, the primary rule. What is the primary rule? Means basic, if you have nothing else. But we have also another level to discuss. ما تفيده النصوص الشرعية, what religious texts tell us. And this is what we call it al-qa'ida al-thanawiyya. We call it secondary rule. Is it clear? What is primary rule? What is secondary rule? This discussion is very detailed discussion, in detailed and advanced books. There are tens of pages about this. But here, it's very simple. We only tell you the result. We don't say why, this is right, why this is right. With respect to primary rule or basic rule, what is primary rule? What aql requires. Okay? Ulama have disagreement here about what is the judgment of aql. Because, sometimes uqala differ. One of the reasons why we need religion and revelation is this, because there are issues that uqala don't agree. Yeah? You see now in the world, many people have differences of opinions about abortion. Some people say this is morally right, and they argue rationally. Some people say morally wrong, some say right. Both argue from reason. And this is why we need revelation, because sometimes reason can be not clear. When it's speculative, there can be differences of opinions. Anyway, here about primary rule, there is disagreement. Some have said the primary rule is at-tasaqut. At-tasaqut. Tasaqut comes from suqut. Suqut means to fall, to drop. At-tasaqut is bab tafa'ul. What does it mean? It means both of them drop. Yes? This many times happens in politics. People from the same group, they don't get together, they oppose each other and both of them drop. Yes? When you are divided, then they all can drop. This riwayah by itself was good, the other riwayah by itself was good. They were not united, so both dropped. Is it clear?
So you reject both.
Yes. So some people said, aql here says we reject both. Let me give you an example that you would very easily understand the case. Are you happy for this? Imagine you want to go to, for example, a museum. You reach a crossroad and you have to make a decision. Shall I go to the right or left or straight? There is a sign which shows right. There is another sign which shows left. What should you do?
Go straight.
If there was only one sign, you would have followed. Because it's a sign put by city council. It's a standard sign. One sign you would follow. It's not fake sign. Everything is like other signs. If it was something put by paper, you said maybe it's fake. A standard sign says right. A standard sign says left. Some ulama say, and they have, I think, good ground for this. They say in these cases, both signs become useless. Tasaqut means we cannot follow any of them. It's as if there is no sign.
Cancels it out.
Pardon?
Cancels it out. Cancels it out.
Yes. But of course, there is something to remember. It doesn't totally cancel out. Because at least you shouldn't go straight. So sometimes, although these two hadiths conflict and both drop, but with respect to the things that they don't conflict, they can be hujjah. Okay? Some ulama say there is takhir. You have choice. You can go to the right, you can go to the left. Yes.
There was some who say this one, some of the ulama who say tasaqut, there was some who say takhir. What ulama choose this? Which ones choose this one?
Different. Over history, tens of people said this, maybe people said that, but most of them say the first one. Al-Muhaqqiqun, they say the first one. Because I think this example of signs is a very good example that you cannot really say takhir. You cannot say you have choice. You get stuck here. Yes? So this is the idea which is more popular.
Does tasaqut take you to bara'a? Salat al-bara'a? Is it different?
Then if these two drop, then you have to see what other things you have to decide. Asalatul hilliya, asalatul bara'a, or whatever. Sometimes can be ihtiyat. This is about, yes.
I was just going to say that, is it possible to get an example from Islamic rulings? Because as one sister pointed out that this might not be a good example because the two arrows may take you to the same direction. Could be one is one that takes you longer way and one takes you a shorter way.
No. You know that definitely they are not going to reach.
Right.
You must be sure that they refute each other. If, for example, because for example, in the airport, in order to take you through the shops for shopping, so they say gates here and then gates here because they want you to go all over. You see that? You see this in the airport?
Yeah.
So this is not like this because this is not conflicting. But imagine, that there is no way these two get together. Either right and then you go to another town, or left and you go to another direction, So there must be takazub, no way to come together. So this is primary ruling. So if we had no guidelines from Sunnah, we had difficulty here. Because then we have to say both drop. Okay? So now let's see is there any way we can get a guideline from riwayat, from Sunnah. So we go to the second level. Okay?
Technically, we shouldn't stop at the first level then. We have to go to the second.
Yes, we have to go to the second level, but we talk about the first level so that we know if in the second level we don't come to any conclusion, do we have any solution
Indeed, yes.
other than that or not? But certainly we should go to the second level. Yes.
You said the second one is there's a choice to do either. You said that wasn't good.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because when you are faced with two signs, then none of them can be accepted. You cannot say both are okay.
If they're both reliable.
Yes. Both, if they were alone, they are reliable because they are standard signs. But now that they conflict each other, they put you in doubt. They confuse you. Okay?
But shouldn't Aql say, alright, let's start with the actual situation, then we go to the, let's start with the ahadith, then
Of
we go
course.
to the Aql.
No, so the primary is that if we have no other way, if they are totally left to us, there is no guideline, what should we do? We say tasabut or takhir. We prefer tasabut. But now, Aql itself, of course, says that if there is guideline from Sunnah, go to it.
Follow that.
So now let's see what is secondary rule in a higher level. There are three opinions here. One is التخيير في الأخذ بأحد الخبرين. You have choice to choose one of them. Based on riwayat, some people have said that you have a choice here to make. Either you go by this hadith or by that hadith. Okay? This is one opinion. The second opinion is you suspend issuing fatwa. You cannot give fatwa according to any of them. But for practice, because you have to do something, you know, then you act according to ihtiyat. Which one is more precautious? Yeah? Act according to that. Don't issue fatwa according to that. For example, one says Ghusl Jum'ah is wajib, another says Ghusl Jum'ah is mustahab. Okay, one is wajib, one is mustahab. What should I do?
Yeah.
I cannot issue fatwa and say it's wajib.
Indeed,
I say no, I have choice. I want to issue fatwa according to one of them. No. You cannot issue fatwa according to any of them, but then you act according to ihtiyat. So you say, you must do Salatul Jum'ah ihtiyat wajib. It's not fatwa, it is ihtiyat. But ihtiyat is not always possible. If, for example, one says Salatul Jum'ah is wajib, another says Salatul Jum'ah is haram,
yes.
what do you do? You do Salatul Jum'ah on Saturday. This is ihtiyat.
I think that's the one Umayyad did.
Do it on Wednesday.
Pardon?
That's what Umayyad
On the
did.
previous day.
Okay. Sometimes ihtiyat is possible, but it's not as easy as wujub al-istihbab. You know, sometimes ihtiyat is not possible, like wujub al. Sometimes it is possible and easy. One says Salatul Jum'ah in the time of Ghaiba is wajib, another says Salatul Jum'ah in the time of Ghaiba is mustahab, as for example. Okay, you do it. No problem, you do it. Sometimes there is no easy ihtiyat, in the sense that you do one of them. You have to do both of them. For example, one that says Salat is qasr For Kasiro Safar, for example, whose shughl is this. One is tamam. So if you want to do ihtiyat, you cannot just do tamam. You have to do jam, qas and tamam. Okay?
And if you don't know the Qibla, you have to pray 8 times.
Yes.
Every direction.
That's not a case for ta'aruz and riwayat. That's another issue. So, according to the second opinion, faqih would not issue fatwa because there is ta'aruz between riwayat, so he doesn't issue fatwa, but he acts with ihtiyat. So he tells you, do the one which is more suitable for ihtiyat. Be cautious here. If ihtiyat requires to do both of them, you have to do both of them. If it requires one of them, one of them. If there's no way to do ihtiyat, then you have choice. The third is you choose the side, the hadith, which is compatible with ihtiyat. So in that case, you can issue fatwa according to that. Between these two riwayat, choose which one, decide which one is more cautious, and then choose that and wholeheartedly go by it.
Would this fatwa be ihtiyat wajib?
No,
This one can be wajib or
no, this is fatwa. He says, what ulama who are muhaqqiq, who are very, deep and insightful have said is, first, we should look for some evidence that can give more weight to one side. Murajjih. If we find murajjih that can give more weight to one side, we go by murajjih. The one that gives preference to one side. If there is no murajjih, then they said, either you have choice or you suspend. So the first or the second, not the third. So I repeat, if these two hadiths, that both of them by themselves were okay, but now conflict, if there is a way to find murajjih for them, that preference for one side, something that can add to its significance and weight of it, we go by it. But if they are equal, then we have to either go by the first opinion, that is takhir, or we go to tawaqquf, means we suspend issuing fatwa. And this is why then we have a discussion about murajjihat. If you look many books on usul, they have discussion about at-ta'adul wa tarajih. Ta'adul means they are equal. Tarajih means there are preferences. It's very beautiful discussion how we can prefer one hadith to another hadith. Each of them, if was alone, was okay, but now there are ways to prefer. Yes.
So the third one is to look for evidence which gives more weight to one side.
Yes.
But the prerequisite of this conflict is that they both are you've already done that. That has already been done.
No, we did checking and each was okay.
Right.
But now, because they all have passed the test, we need further examination.
So what further examination would you be that you haven't done before?
So there are few things that inshallah we'll mention. For example, which one is said by mashhur of ulama, for example, or mashhur of rawat. The majority of narrators have narrated which one? which one is said by the people who had power. You know, for example, you know, sometimes khulafa, they pressurized fuqaha to issue some fatwa. Okay? Or fuqaha who had good relation with the khulafa had some idea and the government was putting pressure. So then if you have two hadiths, if one of them is in compliance with the view of those type of fuqaha and khulafa and the other one is not, we go for the one which is not, because that one can be taqiyya. You understand? So for example, you see that in the time of, for example, Imam Sadiq, when he said this, the fuqaha who were good with khulafa have the view which is exactly like one of these hadiths. So you realize that this hadith was for taqiyya. So inshallah we discuss all these things. So a summary up to here, I leave murajjahat for next session inshallah. The summary of this discussion of ta'aruz is that if you have two hadiths or two sets of hadiths that they have passed the initial checkings of sanad and matn, okay, the narrators are okay, the text is accurate, so they have passed the test, but they conflict in the sense that they both cannot be right, they both cannot be correct, they both cannot be meant, because they expect different things from us. Here, we have to find a solution. We cannot act according to both of them. We say there are two levels of discussion. One is at the basic level, if we have no guidelines from religion, what do rational people do? When there are two signs, for example, conflicting. Some people say they both drop, some people there is choice, but it seems that they both drop. Okay? But a higher level is to refer to the ahadith, because this issue is very well explained in the hadith, and we have lots of hadith about this. If they are totally equal, it's one way of dealing this. If there are preferences, we go by preferences, but those preferences are mentioned in the hadith. So inshallah next session we talk about taraji, the preferences. But if there is no preference, some ulama have said that we should do takhir. We have choice. Some people said no, we should suspend fatwa. There is another opinion which is not very perhaps popular, and that is you issue fatwa according to the one which is more compatible with ihtiyat. So there are three opinions, but two of them are more popular. Inshallah, we continue this discussion in the next week. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.